Here's the uncomfortable truth about closeout. You have been trained to treat it as a paperwork phase, and that framing is what gets architects sued. Closeout is where the building owner stops being a client and starts being an operator, and the gap between those two roles is where the architect's legal exposure sits for the next decade. The owner expects a working building. Your contract is winding down. The contractor is mentally on the next project. And the documents that need to bridge the next 10 years of building operations are getting assembled in a rush by people who will not be around to answer questions next year. The ARE tests this phase because most architects underweight it. They treat closeout as housekeeping. The exam writes from the lawsuit that arrives in month 11. Here is why this last phase carries the risk it does. 4 reasons closeout is high-risk territory. First, the punch list. Under A201, the contractor prepares the punch list and submits it to the architect for review. It is not the architect's freelance list of grievances. Architects who get this wrong end up in arguments over scope they have no contractual basis to enforce. Second, final completion. Final completion releases the remaining retainage and starts the statute of repose clock, the hard outer limit, often 10 years from substantial completion, on certain construction defect claims. Signing it early or late has direct cash and liability consequences. Third, the O&M manuals and warranties. These documents are the building operator's reference library for the next 10 or 15 years, and gaps in them routinely come back as lawsuits. And fourth, the 11-month walkthrough, the architect's last scheduled visit before the 1-year warranty period closes, designed to catch defects while the contractor is still on the hook. Here's how the 6 subsections walk that sequence in order. Walking the 6 subsections in chronological order. 2.1 sets up why this phase matters at all. The architect's exposure does not end at substantial completion. It extends through the warranty period and, for some defect categories, through the state's statute of repose. 2.2 covers the punch list, who prepares it under A201, who reviews it, and what the right standard is for completeness. 2.3 is final completion, including the contractor's affidavit on G706, the consent of surety, and the final certificate. 2.4 is the operation and maintenance manual package, the documents the owner needs to operate the building safely and efficiently. 2.5 walks the warranty landscape, implied warranties, express warranties, and extended manufacturer warranties, and how each is triggered. And 2.6 covers seasonal commissioning and the 11-month walkthrough, the structured visit that catches defects while the warranty is still in force. One alignment point before we step into section 2.1. 4 anchors before we begin. First, closeout is not housekeeping. The architect's exposure tail extends well past final completion, through the warranty period for sure, and through the state's statute of repose for certain defect claims. How you close out is the defense file you'll need in year 4 if something fails. Second, the punch list is the contractor's list with the architect's review, not the architect's invented list. The exam writes questions designed to catch architects who don't know which way that direction runs. Third, final completion is a real legal moment. It releases retainage, it triggers the architect's final certificate, and it starts statute of repose clocks. Treat the signature on G704 and G706 with the gravity it carries. And fourth, the 11-month walkthrough is the architect's last scheduled opportunity to protect the owner before the warranty closes. Skip it, and the owner is on their own. With that posture set, we step into section 2.1. Here's the thing most architects get wrong about closeout. You will hear it in every firm during the last month of a job. It is just paperwork at this point. That sentence is the most dangerous mistake of the whole project. Project closeout is not paperwork. It is the formal verification that a building is safe for the people who will use it. Substantial completion, punch lists, final inspections, warranty documentation, and commissioning all exist to confirm that every life safety system works as designed before the public walks through the door. The architect who treats closeout as a clerical wrap-up has handed the owner an occupied building that was never actually verified. And when the fire alarm fails during a real fire, the lawsuit that follows names the architect who signed the substantial completion certificate. Walk through how closeout failures translate directly into public harm. The exam tests this connection on almost every CE question. 5 closeout failures. 5 direct harms to the public. Issuing substantial completion prematurely puts occupants into a building before its life safety systems are verified. They move in, and a fire alarm circuit that was never commissioned is the one that fails in a real fire. Punch lists that include fire protection deficiencies leave gaps during occupancy, and an emergency response that depends on the working smoke control system is the one that gets compromised. Skipping HVAC commissioning means the ventilation and smoke control systems are not verified. They may run, but no one has tested whether they actually do what the design called for. Warranty documentation that never gets collected becomes the reason a failed roof or a failed mechanical system has no recourse 5 years later. And a post-occupancy evaluation that nobody performs means the same design failures get repeated on the next 3 projects this firm takes. Every one of these connections is the answer to a closeout question on the exam. The reason all 5 of these failures matter to the architect personally is rooted in the purpose of the ARE itself. Read that quote slowly. Closeout is the culmination, the moment where everything the design team did becomes a building that real human beings now occupy. Every certificate the architect signs at this stage is a public statement. I have inspected this, and I am willing to put my license behind the claim that it is ready. The architect who treats G704 as a stamp and a signature is making that claim without doing the work. The architect who treats it as the culmination is the one who walks the building, runs the systems, verifies the commissioning reports, and only signs once the evidence is in front of them. Carry these 5 harms and the culmination framing into the rest of Section 2.1. Substantial completion is where the architect's signature carries the most public safety weight. 5 takeaways to anchor the rest of Section 2.1. Closeout is formal verification of public safety, not the paperwork wrap-up the schedule makes it look like. The 5 common closeout failures each map to identifiable harm to the building's occupants, which is why NCARB tests them on every CE form. Substantial completion is the single highest stakes signature an architect makes during the construction phase, and the certificate that carries the most legal consequence. The exam rewards candidates who treat closeout as the culmination of the work, the verification that everything the design team promised is actually delivered. And the architect who skips that verification is the one who eventually answers the deposition question about why the building was certified before its life safety systems were. Most architects can recite the definition of substantial completion. Almost none can recite all 5 of its consequences cold. And that is the gap NCARB writes every closeout question into. Substantial completion is the date the owner can occupy the building for its intended purpose, certified by the architect on AIA G704. That single sentence sounds modest. It is anything but. From that one date, 5 legally significant events fire simultaneously. The 1-year warranty period begins. The statute of repose clock starts. Retainage is partially released. Property insurance shifts from contractor to owner, and the owner gains the right to occupy. Get the date wrong by a few days, and a contractor who was 30 days late owes 30 days of liquidated damages, or doesn't. Get the certifier wrong on the exam, and you have just picked the trap answer that fails the question. The architect determines substantial completion, not the contractor, not the owner, not the building official. Set substantial completion alongside final completion, and the difference becomes the foundation for every closeout question. 2 milestones, 2 tests. On the left, substantial completion turns on a single judgment. Can the owner occupy the building and use it for its intended purpose? If yes, the architect issues G704 with the punch list attached, and the 5 legal clocks start firing. Punch list items may still be outstanding. They do not block substantial completion as long as they do not impair use. On the right, final completion is a different test entirely. Every contract requirement has been satisfied. Every punch list item closed, every submittal delivered, every lien waiver signed, every warranty collected. The architect issues the final certificate for payment, full retainage is released, and the contract closes. The 2 milestones are typically weeks or months apart. The exam writes wrong answers that conflate them, and the candidate who treats substantial completion as full completion picks the wrong answer almost every time. Walk through the 5 consequences that fire the moment G704 is signed. 5 triggers, 5 legal consequences. The warranty start fires the contractor's 1-year correction period under A201, Section 12.2.2. Every defect the owner reports inside that year becomes the contractor's obligation to fix. The statute of repose starts the state's absolute cutoff clock, 6 to 15 years, depending on the jurisdiction, beyond which no defect lawsuit can be filed against the architect or contractor. Retainage is partially released, which gives the contractor a real cash flow benefit while leaving the owner enough withheld funds to enforce punch list completion. Property insurance shifts from contractor to owner on the certified date, which is why the architect must confirm in writing that the owner has a policy in force that day, because a gap of even 1 day can be the gap during which a fire happens and no one is covered. And the owner gains legal occupancy. They assume operational responsibility for security, utilities, and maintenance. 5 clocks, 1 architect signed certificate. The 3 trap answers candidates pick on this slide all live in one pattern: getting the certifier wrong. 3 traps, all pointed at the same target: moving the determination away from the architect. First trap holds that the contractor determines substantial completion, which is wrong because A201 Section 9.8.3 puts the determination on the architect. The contractor requests the inspection and the architect decides. Second trap holds that substantial completion happens automatically when the building is ready, which is wrong because A201 requires an architect inspection followed by a signed G704 certificate before any legal clock starts. Third trap holds that the CO from the building official triggers substantial completion, which is wrong because the certificate of occupancy is a government document about code compliance, while G704 is a contract document about contract compliance. Different issuers, different bases, different legal effects. A building can have a CO but not be substantially complete, or be substantially complete without a CO. Pick any of the 3 trap answers on the exam and you lose the question. 5 takeaways to anchor the rest of Section 2.1. Substantial completion is where the architect's signature carries the most legal weight. 5 takeaways. Substantial completion is the date the owner can occupy the building for its intended purpose, and that judgment turns on whether the work is fit for use, not whether every item is complete. The architect determines it, not the contractor, not the owner, not the building official. The exam will offer all 3 as wrong answers, and only the architect is correct. 5 legal triggers fire from that one certified date: warranty start, statute of repose, retainage release, insurance shift, and owner occupancy. Final completion is a different milestone with a different test, every contract requirement satisfied, and a different certificate. And confusing substantial completion with final completion is the single most tested closeout trap on the CE division. Get the date right, get the certifier right, and the rest of Section 2.1 falls into place. G704 looks deceptively simple. 1 page, 3 signature lines, and a punch list stapled to the back. Here's the thing. That one page does 5 distinct legal things at once. It establishes the date of substantial completion, attaches the punch list, defines which responsibilities shift from contractor to owner, sets the deadline for finishing punch list work, and binds 3 parties to the certified date. The reason it requires 3 signatures is that it reshapes the legal relationship between every party on the project. The architect certifies, the owner accepts, the contractor acknowledges what it still owes. An architect who hands you G704 across the table like a routine form is asking 3 signatories to sign something they may not understand. And the lawsuit that follows always traces back to that conversation. Walk through the 5 distinct items G704 documents, because each one carries its own legal consequence. 5 items, 1 certificate. The date of substantial completion is the architect's call, the moment all 5 legal clocks begin. The punch list is attached to the certificate and obligates the contractor to finish what is listed. The responsibility allocation defines which obligations shift from contractor to owner: security of the site, utilities, ongoing maintenance, and insurance. The time for completion line sets the deadline for finishing punch list work, which becomes the baseline if the owner later backcharges the contractor for slow completion. And the 3 signature lines bind all 3 parties to the certified date. Get any one of these 5 items wrong, and the consequence flows through the entire warranty period. The process that leads to G704 starts with the contractor, not the architect, under A201, Section 9.8.2. The workflow runs in 4 steps. Step 1. The contractor prepares the punch list under A201, Section 9.8.2, and notifies the architect that the work is substantially complete. The contractor, not the architect, is the party who lists what still needs doing, because the contractor is the party who knows what is and is not finished. Step 2. The architect conducts a prompt inspection to verify whether the work is in fact substantially complete. Step 3. If it is complete, the architect prepares G704 with the contractor's punch list attached and routes the certificate for 3 signatures. Step 4. If it is not complete, the architect notifies the contractor in writing, and the cost of any reinspection can be charged through the owner. Notice the sequence: contractor requests, architect inspects, architect certifies. The architect never inspects without a request, and the contractor never certifies anything. The reinspection fee mechanics trip almost every CE candidate because the money path is not what it looks like. 3 rules to keep the money path straight. First, the architect's contract is with the owner, not the contractor. So when reinspection is required, the architect bills the owner as an additional service under B101, Section 4.2. The architect does not invoice the contractor and never has. Second, the owner pays the architect, then recovers from the contractor under A201, Section 9.8.3. That section gives the owner the right to deduct reinspection costs from amounts owed to the contractor. Third, the recovery happens against retainage or the contract sum, not against the architect's invoice. The architect to owner to contractor sequence matters because every CE exam form writes a wrong answer that has the architect billing the contractor directly. Pick that answer and you have just rewritten the chain of contracts. Carry these 5 items and the 4-step workflow as the foundation for everything that follows in Section 2.1. 5 takeaways. G704 is a 3-signature instrument: architect, owner, contractor, and it reshapes how risk and money flow on the rest of the project. 5 distinct items are documented on the certificate, but it is the architect's certified date that fires all the downstream legal clocks. The contractor requests the inspection by submitting a punch list under Section 9.8.2. The architect inspects, and the architect certifies. Reinspection costs flow architect to owner to contractor through additional services and Section 9.8.3, never directly from architect to contractor. And if the owner refuses to sign while the architect has certified, the legal clocks typically still begin on the architect's certified date. Most architects remember maybe one consequence of substantial completion. The exam wants you to know six. Six legal shifts fire the moment the architect signs G704. Warranty start, statute of repose, insurance shift, retainage release, liquidated damages stop, owner occupancy. And each one is tested on its own. You will see a question that asks when the 1-year correction period begins, and 3 of the 4 answer choices will look reasonable. Final completion, the move-in date, the date the last punch list item is finished. The right answer is the architect certified date on G704, and that is the date that anchors every other clock on the project, including the lawsuit clock under the statute of repose. Lock in the count first, because the exam writes wrong answers that quietly swap 5 for 6 or 6 for 7. 6. Not 5, not 7. 6 legal shifts trigger at substantial completion, and you should be able to recite them cold. Warranty start, statute of repose, insurance shift, retainage release, liquidated damages stop, owner occupancy. Memorize the 6 because the exam loves to omit liquidated damages from the list of consequences and call it complete at 5. That is the wrong answer. LDs stop accruing on the substantial completion date, not the final completion date, and the contractor who is 30 days late to substantial completion owes 30 days of LDs, even if final takes another 60 days. The LD clock does not run through punch list cleanup. 6 triggers, 1 architect certified date. Walk through each of the 6 triggers and what changes when it fires. 6 triggers, 6 effects. The warranty start fires the contractor's 1-year correction period under A201, section 12.2.2. Every defect the owner reports inside that year is the contractor's obligation to fix. The statute of repose begins the state-by-state liability clock, the absolute cutoff after which no construction defect claim can be brought against the architect or contractor. The insurance shift moves property coverage from contractor to owner, which is why the owner must have a policy effective on the date the architect certifies. Retainage is partially released. The contractor gets cash flow relief, but the owner keeps back enough to fund punch list completion. Liquidated damages stop accruing. No more daily penalties for late completion, which is why a contractor who is late to substantial completion is finance protected once that date is certified. And the owner gains legal occupancy. They assume operational responsibility for the building from the certified date forward. The 3 trap answers all live in confusing which clock starts when. 3 traps the exam writes again and again. First trap, the warranty starts at final completion. Wrong. The 1-year correction period under A201 section 12.2.2 starts on the substantial completion date shown on G704. And if substantial completion is January 1st, the correction period ends December 31st of that same year. Second trap, liquidated damages run until final completion. Wrong. LDs stop accruing at substantial completion, even if final is months later. Third trap, insurance shifts when the owner moves in. Wrong. Insurance shifts on the architect's certified G704 date, which is why the owner must have a policy in force on that exact date. Each wrong answer is intuitive, which is exactly why NCARB writes them. Hold the count of 6 and the 3 trap patterns as you move into partial occupancy in the next slide. 5 takeaways. 6 triggers fire at substantial completion, not 5, not 7, and the exam will write a wrong answer that swaps the count. Memorize the 6. Warranty start, statute of repose, insurance shift, retainage release, liquidated damages stop, owner occupancy. Every one of them anchors to the architect's certified date on G704 and no other date. Liquidated damages in particular stop at substantial completion, not final completion, which is the trap that catches half the candidates who missed this slide. And the 3 classic trap answers all live in the same pattern. They swap the certified G704 date for the move-in date or for final completion. recognize the swap, and the answer is always the certified date. Here is a scenario you will see on the exam every form. The owner needs to start operations in the new wing in 6 weeks, even though punch list work is still ongoing throughout the rest of the building. The contractor and architect agree to let the owner move into that wing. Question: has substantial completion been triggered for that wing? Most candidates say yes. The right answer is no. Partial occupancy is not substantial completion in miniature. It is a separate legal arrangement under A201, Section 9.9, and it requires 3 things the architect must verify before it happens: explicit agreement between owner and contractor, written documentation of the area's condition, and consent from the property insurer. Skip the insurer consent step, and if a fire breaks out in that wing the next week, neither the owner nor the contractor may have coverage, and the lawsuit that follows usually names the architect who let the move-in happen without verifying consent. Read the 2 concepts side by side, because the exam writes wrong answers by quietly swapping their features. Set the 2 side by side. On the left, partial occupancy applies to a specific portion of the work, usually a wing or floor the owner needs early. Insurance is a joint or shared responsibility per the written agreement that has to be drafted before occupancy begins. Insurer consent is required, not negotiable, not implicit, but consent in writing. And there is no separate AIA certificate for partial occupancy. A written agreement between owner and contractor is what governs. On the right, substantial completion applies to the entire project or a designated phased portion. Insurance shifts entirely to the owner on the certified date. Insurer consent is not typically required because the policy was already structured around the substantial completion handoff. An AIA G704 is the certificate, with the punch list attached. The exam writes wrong answers by swapping any one of these features. Partial occupancy scope with full project warranty start is the classic trap. 6 features across the 2 concepts. Read the full grid so you can spot the swap on every question. 6 features across both concepts. The scope row separates a specific portion from the entire project. The warranty start row tells you the occupied portion may have its own warranty trigger only if the agreement says so. Otherwise, the warranty is tied to the project-wide substantial completion. Insurance is joint and shared for partial occupancy, fully shifted to the owner for substantial completion. Insurer consent is required for partial occupancy and not typically required for substantial completion, which is the single biggest distinction on the exam. The certificate row. Partial occupancy uses a written agreement. Substantial completion uses G704. And the architect's role in both is to inspect. But for partial occupancy, the inspection documents the accepted condition before move-in, while for substantial completion, it certifies the date all 5 legal clocks fire. 3 steps the architect must take before partial occupancy begins. Miss 1, and you have created uninsured exposure. 3 steps, everyone mandatory, everyone in writing. Step 1. The architect inspects the area to be occupied and documents the existing conditions in writing. That document becomes the baseline that distinguishes damage caused by the owner's use from defects in the contractor's work. Step 2. The owner and contractor execute a written agreement that addresses insurance coverage, maintenance responsibility, and who pays for damage to the occupied area. Without that document, every dispute that follows turns into a negotiation under adversarial conditions. Step 3. The property insurer consents in writing to the partial occupancy, per A201 Section 9.9.1. Insurer consent is the step that gets skipped in practice and is the step that gets the architect named in a claim when something goes wrong. If the insurer never consented and a fire breaks out the next week, neither the owner nor the contractor may have coverage on that space. Carry the 3-step mandatory checklist into the next slide on owner responsibilities. 5 takeaways. Partial occupancy is not substantial completion in miniature. It is a separate legal arrangement under A201, Section 9.9, with its own requirements. 6 features differ across the two concepts: scope, warranty start, insurance, insurer consent, certificate, and architect inspection. Each feature is a place the exam writes a wrong answer by swapping. Insurer consent is the non-negotiable step for partial occupancy. The architect must verify it before any space is occupied. The architect inspects and documents the existing condition of the area before move-in, creating the baseline for distinguishing owner-caused damage from contractor defects. And skipping insurer consent can void coverage entirely. If something goes wrong in that wing the next week, neither owner nor contractor may have insurance to respond. Most architects describe substantial completion as the finish line. It is not. It is a handover. On the certified date, the contractor is still on the job, finishing punch list, honoring the warranty, ensuring uncompleted work, while the owner takes legal responsibility for operating the building. The most tested moment in this handover is the insurance shift. Property coverage moves from the contractor's builder's risk policy to the owner's property insurance the moment the architect signs G704. If the owner does not have a policy effective that exact date, the building is uninsured during its most vulnerable moment, and a fire in that 24-hour gap creates a lawsuit that names the architect for certifying without confirming coverage. The architect's job at substantial completion is to make sure the owner is actually ready to take over. Insurance in place, security plan in place, operating staff briefed, confirm in writing, every time. Walk the 5 responsibilities the owner takes on at substantial completion. 5 responsibilities, all effective on the certified date. Property insurance covers the completed work. The owner's policy must be enforced the day the architect signs G704, not the day the owner moves furniture in. Security of the building and site becomes the owner's problem. Locks rekeyed, alarms armed, personnel posted if needed. Utilities transfer. Every kilowatt and every gallon of water billed after the certified date hits the owner's account, which is why utility transfer requests must be filed in advance. Routine maintenance. Cleaning the lobby, changing filters, lubricating door hardware becomes the owner's task, not the contractor's. And owner-caused damage is on the owner. If a tenant's forklift dents drywall the week after move-in, the contractor has no obligation to repair it under the contract. The contractor does not walk away at substantial completion. 5 obligations follow them past the certified date. 5 obligations the contractor still owns after substantial completion. Punch list completion within the time specified on G704. That time becomes the back charge baseline if the contractor misses it. The 1-year correction period under A201, Section 12.2.2, 12 months from the certified date during which the contractor must return and fix defects the owner reports. Insurance on uncompleted portions of the work under Section 11.3. Until those portions reach final completion, the contractor's builder's risk policy still covers them. Long-term specified warranties under Division 01. Roofing, waterproofing, glazing. That can run 2 to 20 years from substantial completion. And manufacturer warranty pass-through. The contractor delivers each manufacturer's warranty terms to the owner, so the owner can claim directly against the manufacturer for product-specific failures. Substantial completion is a handover. It is not an ending. 3 stakes the architect must verify before signing G704, because insurance gaps are the single biggest source of post-SC lawsuits. 3 stakes the architect verifies before signing. Every one of them a potential lawsuit if missed. First, owner property insurance must be enforced on the certified date. Get the policy number in writing from the owner before issuing G704. The architect who signs without confirming coverage is the architect a jury asks about when a fire destroys the building the week after move-in and no one is paying for the rebuild. Second, the contractor's builder's risk must remain in force on uncompleted portions per A201 Section 11.3. Partial completion means partial coverage transfer, not full transfer, and the contractor's policy still has to respond on the unfinished work. Third, the owner must have actually assumed security, utilities, and maintenance by the certified date. If the cleaning crew has not been hired and a slip and fall happens in a dirty lobby on day 2, the contractor and architect both end up named in the suit. Verify all 3, document all 3, then sign. 5 takeaways to anchor the handover into the punch list mechanics that follow. 5 takeaways. Substantial completion is a handover, not an ending. Operations move to the owner while the contractor's punch list, correction period, and long-term warranty obligations continue. 5 responsibilities shift to the owner on the certified date: property insurance, security, utilities, routine maintenance, and liability for owner-caused damage. 5 obligations stay with the contractor: punch list completion, the 1-year correction period, insurance on uncompleted portions, long-term specified warranties, and manufacturer warranty pass-through. The single most important verification the architect makes before signing G704 is owner property insurance in force on the certified date, confirmed in writing, and gaps in security, utilities, or maintenance create owner-caused damage disputes that always come back to the architect who signed before the owner was actually ready. Here's the rule most architects reverse in practice, and the exam catches you doing it. Under A201, Section 9.8.2, the contractor, not the architect, prepares the initial punch list and submits it to the architect along with a written request for an inspection. The architect then inspects, refines the list, adds items the contractor missed or tried to hide, and finalizes it as an attachment to G704. The architect who walks the building with a clipboard making the punch list from scratch has accepted a role A201 never assigned them. And if a defect surfaces 6 months later that nobody listed, that architect is the one named in the lawsuit. The contractor knows what is unfinished in their own work, so requiring them to document it forces ownership. The architect's job is to verify, not to invent. Read the rule directly from A201 before walking the workflow. Read the rule slowly. When the contractor considers that the work is substantially complete, the contractor shall prepare and submit to the architect a comprehensive list of items to be completed or corrected. 3 things to notice in that one sentence. The trigger is the contractor's judgment that the work is substantially complete. The verb is shall, meaning mandatory, and the list goes to the architect for review and refinement. Section 9.8.3 picks up from there. The architect inspects to determine whether the work is in fact substantially complete, and if it is, the architect prepares the certificate with the punch list attached. The sequence is contractor prepares, architect verifies, architect certifies, and reversing that sequence is how the architect ends up with personal liability for items they never agreed to find. Set the 5 steps of the workflow in order so you can answer the exam question in any direction it comes. 5 steps, in order. Step 1. The contractor prepares the preliminary punch list under A201, Section 9.8.2, items to be completed or corrected. This is the contractor's document, drafted by the contractor's superintendent and subcontractor foreman who know what is and is not finished. Step 2. The contractor notifies the architect that the work is substantially complete and formally requests an inspection. Step 3. The architect inspects the building with the contractor present, refines the list, and adds items the contractor missed: concealed defects, work that looks acceptable but does not meet specification, items the contractor was hoping the architect would not notice. Step 4. The architect prepares G704 with the finalized punch list attached and routes the certificate for 3 signatures: architect, owner, contractor. Step 5. All 3 parties sign, and the contractor completes the punch list within the time specified on the certificate. Miss the deadline, and the owner has a back charge remedy under Section 2.5. 3 traps the exam rights when this workflow gets reversed or compressed. 3 traps that move steps away from where A201 places them. First trap holds that the architect prepares the initial punch list. Wrong, because Section 9.8.2 puts the list on the contractor, and the architect who agrees to author it from scratch has accepted personal liability for every defect that should have been listed and was not. Second trap holds that the contractor certifies substantial completion. Wrong, because Section 9.8.3 puts the determination on the architect, and the contractor's role is only to request the inspection. Third trap holds that G704 is a 2-party document signed by architect and owner. Wrong, because it is a 3-signature instrument with architect, owner, and contractor all binding to the certified date. Reverse any of the 3 on the exam, and you pick the trap answer that costs you the question. 5 takeaways to lock in the workflow before moving on to incomplete work distinctions. 5 takeaways. The contractor prepares the initial punch list under A201, Section 9.8.2. That is, the verb shall rule, and reversing it on the exam is the most common closeout trap. The architect inspects, refines the list, and adds items the contractor missed, and that refinement is the architect's role, not the original drafting. The architect prepares G704 with the finalized punch list attached because the certificate is the architect's instrument. 3 parties sign G704, architect, owner, and contractor, all bound to the certified date. And reversing the workflow, letting the architect create the list from scratch, is how the architect assumes personal liability for finding every defect, which is a role the contract never assigned. Workflow first. Liability follows. Every punch list judgment you will ever make as an architect comes down to one question. Can the owner use the building for its intended purpose? If the answer is yes, the remaining items are punch list items, minor deficiencies that do not block occupancy, and G704 can be issued. If the answer is no, the work is incomplete. Substantial completion has not occurred, and you cannot certify it. The exam writes scenarios designed to test where you draw that line. Touch-up paint in 12 rooms and a missing cabinet pull on a residential project? Punch list. Issue G704. The fire alarm is operational, but the final commissioning report has not been signed by the third-party commissioner? Incomplete work. Do not issue G704, no matter how much else is done. Life safety systems must be fully operational, tested, and accepted before substantial completion. Get the call wrong, and you have signed a certificate on a building that is not actually ready. And the lawsuit that follows names you personally for what should have been caught. Set the 2 categories side by side, and the intended use test does the rest. 2 categories with 1 decisive test. On the left, punch list items are minor deficiencies that do not prevent the owner from occupying and using the building for its intended purpose. Touch-up paint, a cabinet pull, a grout joint that needs cleaning up, a door closer that needs an adjustment. None of these stop the owner from running the building, and all of them belong on the punch list with G704 issued. On the right, incomplete work is work not yet performed or so deficient it impairs occupancy. Missing fire alarm devices, no egress lighting, HVAC not operational, missing accessible route components, structural items unfinished. None of these can be put on a punch list and dismissed. They prevent the owner from using the building safely, and substantial completion has not actually occurred. Cross the 2 columns at your own risk on the exam and at your own license on a real project. 5 features compare the 2 categories side by side. 5 features distinguish the 2 categories. Definition. Punch list items are minor deficiencies, while incomplete work is work not yet done or substantially deficient. Occupancy effect. The owner can occupy and use the building safely with punch list items present, while the owner cannot occupy with incomplete work. Examples. Punch list items are paint touch-ups, hardware adjustments, minor grout repair, missing cover plates. Incomplete work is missing fire alarm devices, no stair handrails, HVAC not operational, missing egress lighting. G704 effect. With punch list items, the architect issues the certificate with the list attached. With incomplete work, the architect cannot issue at all. Retainage. Punch list items justify a minor proportional holdback to fund completion. Incomplete work justifies a significant withhold because the work is not yet payable. Cross any row in the wrong direction on the exam, and the answer is wrong. Life safety is the one category where the architect has no discretion. 3 examples that always fall on the incomplete work side. 3 items that are always incomplete work. Never punch list. First, the fire alarm is not fully commissioned and tested, even if the panel is energized and the devices are mounted. A contractor will frame this as a punch list item because the system looks done, but commissioning, third-party testing, and authority having jurisdiction acceptance are part of operational. Issue G704 without them, and you have certified a building where the alarm may not respond in a real fire, and the architect named in that lawsuit is the one who signed. Second, egress lighting or accessible routes are missing or non-functional. These are not finish items. They are occupant safety items, and a building without working egress lighting cannot be safely occupied at night. Third, sprinkler or smoke control systems lack AHJ acceptance. Even if the contractor has tested them internally, without the local authority's sign-off, the building is not legally usable for its intended purpose. Life safety is the one category where the architect has no discretion, so accept no contractor framing that puts a life safety system on the punch list. 5 takeaways to anchor the intended use test before the contractor obligations slide. 5 takeaways. 1 question decides every punch list judgment. Can the owner use the building for its intended purpose? Answer yes, and the remaining items are punch list items. G704 can be issued. Answer no, and the work is incomplete. G704 cannot be issued, no matter how much else is done. Life safety systems are always incomplete work, never punch list. Fire alarm, egress, sprinklers, smoke control, accessible routes, accept no contractor framing that puts any of these on the punch list. 5 features distinguish the 2 categories: definition, occupancy effect, examples, G704 effect, retainage. Each one is a place the exam tests the boundary, and misclassifying incomplete work as punch list is how the architect ends up personally named in the post-occupancy lawsuit, because the signature on G704 is the legal record that the architect found the building fit for use when it was not. Once G704 is signed, you put the contractor on a clock. Every item on the punch list must be completed within the time specified on the certificate. That time is enforceable, and missing it triggers the owner's backcharge remedy under A201, Section 2.5. The contractor is also obligated to coordinate punch list work to minimize disruption to the owner, because the owner is now in the building running operations, and sending a painter through a working office at midday is not acceptable performance. If the contractor blows the deadline, the owner can hire others to finish the work and backcharge the contractor by deducting the cost from retainage or final payment, a direct cost recovery, not a penalty. The architect's job is to document non-performance, certify the actual cost of completion by others, and enforce the chain of contracts. Skip that documentation step, and the backcharge becomes a lawsuit instead of a remedy. Walk the 6 obligations the contractor owes after G704. Every one is enforceable through retainage. 6 obligations, each enforceable. First, complete every item on the punch list within the time specified on G704. That time is contractual, not advisory. Second, coordinate punch list work to minimize disruption to owner operations. The owner is now occupying the building, and the contractor's right to be on site does not include the right to interrupt active use of the space. Third, Notify the architect when items are complete and request reinspection. The burden is on the contractor to declare ready, not on the architect to discover ready. Fourth, bear the cost of reinspection when items fail to pass. If the contractor calls the architect back and the work is still not done, the architect's additional time bills through to the contractor under Section 9.8.3. Fifth, ensure subcontractors complete their respective punch list items. The general cannot delegate the deadline to subs and disclaim responsibility for the missed date. Sixth, maintain insurance on uncompleted portions of the work until final completion under Section 11.3. The money path for reinspection is what trips most candidates. 4 scenarios decide who pays. 4 scenarios, 1 money path. First scenario. The first inspection finds deficiencies. That inspection is covered by the architect's basic services fee. The architect is expected to inspect once for substantial completion. Second scenario. The reinspection shows items properly completed. The contractor performed, the architect verified, and that reinspection is also basic services. Third scenario. The reinspection shows items not completed. The contractor called the architect back prematurely. Now the architect's additional inspection time becomes an additional services charge under B101, Section 4.2, which the owner pays, and the owner then recovers the cost from the contractor under A201, Section 9.8.3. Fourth scenario. Multiple re-inspections needed because the contractor keeps calling premature. Each re-inspection bills through the same path. The architect never invoices the contractor directly. The architect's contract is with the owner. The owner's contract is with the contractor, and the money flows through that chain. 3 rules on the money path keep every CE candidate from picking the trap answer that puts the architect billing the contractor directly. 3 rules to keep the money path straight on every CE form. First, the architect's contract is with the owner. So when reinspection is required, the architect bills the owner as additional services under B101, Section 4.2. The architect does not, and never has, invoiced the contractor directly, and picking the answer that puts the architect billing the contractor rewrites the chain of contracts in a way the documents do not allow. Second, the owner pays the architect, then recovers the cost from the contractor under A201, Section 9.8.3. That section gives the owner the right to deduct reinspection costs from amounts owed to the contractor. Third, the deduction comes from retainage or the contract sum, not from the architect's invoice. The architect gets paid in full, and the owner recovers separately. This is the chain of contracts in action. Architect bills upstream, owner recovers downstream, and every CE exam form writes a wrong answer that collapses the chain. Pick the collapse answer, and the question is wrong. 5 takeaways to lock in the contractor's continuing obligations before moving on to final completion. 5 takeaways. The contractor must complete every punch list item within the time specified on G704. That time is enforceable, and missing it triggers the owner's backcharge remedy under A201, Section 2.5. The owner's remedy for a missed deadline is to hire others, complete the work, and deduct the actual cost from retainage or the contract sum. The architect documents the missed date and certifies the cost. Reinspection of failed items is billed to the contractor, but through the owner, never directly. The architect bills the owner as additional services under B101, Section 4.2, and the owner recovers from the contractor under A201, Section 9.8.3. Insurance on uncompleted portions of the work stays with the contractor until final completion under Section 11.3. The contractor's work is not done at substantial completion. It is paused, with enforceable obligations through to final. Substantial completion is one judgment. Can the owner use this for its intended purpose? Final completion is a checklist, and that distinction is where most architects lose points on closeout questions. Final completion is not a moment. It is a finite list of requirements that all must be satisfied before the architect can issue the final certificate for payment. Every punch list item closed, every submittal delivered, every warranty collected, every lien waiver signed, every training session conducted. Miss any one of these and you cannot certify final completion, and the contractor cannot collect final payment. The exam tests this as a distinct event from substantial completion. Substantial completion unlocks occupancy. Final completion unlocks final payment and full retainage release. The two are weeks or months apart, and candidates who conflate them lose closeout questions because every wrong answer is a piece of the FC checklist offered as if it were the SC test. Set substantial completion and final completion side by side to make the test framing visible. Two milestones, two completely different tests. On the left, substantial completion turns on one judgment. Is the work fit for its intended use? The architect makes that call, issues G704 with the punch list attached, and most retainage is released. Punch list items may still remain on the list. That is, the whole point of the punch list. On the right, final completion turns on a finite checklist. Every requirement satisfied, every document delivered, every punch list item closed and verified. The architect issues the final certificate for payment. Full retainage is released, and final payment is paid out. Substantial is a judgment. Final is a checklist. Confusing the two is the most tested closeout error on the CE division, because every wrong answer the exam writes about final completion is some piece of the checklist offered up as if it were a substantial completion judgment. Walk the 7 items on the final completion checklist. Each is enforceable. 7 items, every one enforceable. First, the punch list complete. Every item from G704 closed and verified by the architect, not just claimed done by the contractor. Second, final submittals received. All required submittals including operation and maintenance manuals, as-built drawings, and training records. Third, closeout documents delivered. Warranties from manufacturers and subcontractors, spare parts and attic stock per specification, keys with a keying schedule, certificates from the building official and elevator and fire alarm authorities. Fourth, final cleaning completed per the specification, not contractor broom clean, but the level called out in Division 01. Fifth, the architect's final inspection. The architect physically walks the building and confirms every item is acceptable. Sixth, consent of surety on bonded work. AIA G707 from the surety, without which the bond protections can be voided. Seventh, lien waivers from the contractor and from every subcontractor and major material supplier. Skip any one of the 7 and the architect cannot certify final completion. 3 traps the exam writes when this checklist gets compressed or partial credit gets imagined. 3 traps that all treat the checklist as if partial credit existed. First trap, 95% of closeout documents delivered equals 95% of retainage released. Wrong. Final payment is all or nothing. Either every requirement is satisfied and the architect certifies, or one item is missing and the architect cannot certify. There is no proportional release tied to checklist completion. Second trap, the final inspection is optional if the punch list is signed off and the contractor says the work is done. Wrong. The architect's final inspection is a required step before the final certificate for payment can issue, because the architect's signature represents a professional verification that the work conforms to the contract documents. And that verification requires physical inspection, not just a paperwork review. Third trap, lien waivers from the general contractor suffice to close out the project. Wrong. A subcontractor or major material supplier can file a lien even if the GC has been paid in full and provided a waiver. The owner needs waivers from the contractor and from every sub and supplier of consequence to be protected. 5 takeaways before moving to the final certificate for payment itself. 5 takeaways. Final completion is a checklist, not a single judgment like substantial completion. and that distinction drives every closeout question on the exam. 7 items are required before the architect can certify: punch list complete, final submittals received, closeout documents delivered, final cleaning, architect's final inspection, consent of surety, and lien waivers from contractor and subs. Substantial completion is a judgment about fitness for use. Final completion is a checklist about every contract requirement satisfied. The final certificate for payment is all or nothing. There is no proportional retainage release tied to how many checklist items are done. And lien waivers must come from the contractor and from every subcontractor and major supplier of consequence, because a sub can file a lien even after the GC has been paid in full, and that lien turns into a lawsuit naming the architect who certified final payment without confirming sub waivers. The final certificate for payment is the last document the architect signs on a project, and it carries the most professional liability of any signature an architect makes. By signing, you are representing, in a legally meaningful way, that the work conforms to the contract documents, that final completion has occurred, and that the contractor is entitled to the remaining retainage. That is a personal, professional representation. A latent defect that surfaces 6 years later turns that signature into evidence in a deposition. The architect inspected, the architect signed, the architect certified. A 201 Section 9.10.1 requires specific supporting documents before the final certificate can issue: contractor's affidavit on AIA G706, consent of surety on G707, final lien waivers, and the contractor's final accounting. Each of these exists to protect the owner and the architect from a different risk: unpaid subs filing liens, surety refusing to honor bonds, hidden payables the contractor never disclosed. Skip a step, and the architect is the one who pays for it years later. Walk the 6 documents that must be in place before the final certificate can issue. 6 documents, 6 distinct risks closed. First, the architect's final inspection, physical verification that the work is satisfactorily complete per the contract documents, not a paperwork review. Second, the contractor's final accounting, a reconciliation of every change order, every adjustment, and the final contract sum. Third, the contractor's affidavit of payment on AIA G706, a sworn statement that the contractor has paid all subcontractors, material suppliers, and labor obligations. Without G706, a sub can claim the GC was paid but did not pass the money down, and the lien follows. Fourth, consent of surety on AIA G707, required on every bonded project because final payment without surety consent can void the bond protections the owner is paying for. Fifth, final lien waivers from the contractor and from every subcontractor and major supplier. The only way the owner's title to the property stays clean. Sixth, closeout documents, operation and maintenance manuals, as-built drawings, warranties, and training records, every one delivered and accepted before the architect signs. 3 legal representations the architect makes by signing. Each one is what gets pulled into the post-occupancy lawsuit. 3 representations, all carried by one signature. First, the architect represents that the work conforms to the contract documents. That is, a professional verification, not a casual sign-off, and it relies on the architect's physical inspection and review of the closeout submittals. If a latent defect surfaces years later and the building is not actually conforming, the architect's signature is the evidence the owner uses to bring the suit. Second, the architect represents that final completion has occurred, meaning every item on the 7-item checklist from the previous slide has been satisfied. Third, the architect represents that the contractor is entitled to the remaining retainage, which is the legal basis on which the owner releases final payment. If the owner releases payment based on a careless architect's signature, and a sub later files a lien because the contractor never paid them, the owner sues the contractor and the architect for the loss. 3 representations, each with its own liability exposure, all bound up in one professional act. The final certificate for payment is not a clerical formality. It is the highest stakes document the architect signs on the project. 5 takeaways before moving to consent of surety and retainage mechanics. 5 takeaways. The final certificate for payment is the architect's highest liability signature on a project. It represents that the work conforms to the contract documents, that final completion has occurred, and that the contractor is entitled to remaining retainage. 6 supporting documents must be in place before the certificate can issue: architect's final inspection, contractor's final accounting, contractor's affidavit of payment on G706, consent of surety on G707, final lien waivers, and closeout documents. AIA G706 is the contractor's sworn affidavit that all subs and material suppliers have been paid. Without it, a sub can lien even after the GC was paid in full. AIA G707 is consent of surety, required on bonded work, because final payment without surety consent can void the bond. And the architect's final inspection is a required physical verification, never optional, never paperwork only, because the architect's signature is the legal record of conformance. On a bonded project, you have a third party guaranteeing the contractor's performance and payment, the surety. The performance bond protects the owner if the contractor fails to finish. The payment bond protects subcontractors and suppliers if the contractor fails to pay them. Both bonds come with a condition most owners, and not enough architects, understand. Final payment to the contractor requires the surety's written consent on AIA G707. Skip that consent, and the owner can forfeit the protection of both bonds. Here is the scenario the exam writes. Owner releases final payment without G707. 3 months later, a subcontractor files a lien because the contractor never paid them. Owner turns to the surety, expecting the payment bond to respond. Surety refuses, argues the owner's premature payment to the contractor released the surety from its obligations. Now the owner is dealing with the lien directly, and the architect who certified final payment without first confirming G707 was in hand is named in the lawsuit that follows. G707 is not paperwork. It is the document that keeps bond protection alive through final payment. Walk the retainage stages because the architect's job is to certify each release based on actual completion. 4 stages, each tied to a specific architect certification. During construction, retainage is withheld from every progress payment, typically 5 to 10% depending on the contract and state statute. That withhold is the owner's main lever to ensure the contractor finishes the work. At substantial completion, the retainage may be partially reduced to 2.5% or 5% depending on contract terms, when the architect issues G704. The reduction acknowledges that most of the work is done while leaving enough withheld to fund punch list completion. At final completion, the remaining retainage is released in full with the final certificate for payment, but only after the architect has verified every checklist item, including G707. Back charges for missed punch list deadlines are deducted from the release at the final stage, with the architect certifying the actual cost of completion by others. Premature retainage release at any stage removes the owner's ability to enforce completion and turns into a lawsuit when the contractor walks. 3 stakes if G707 is missing. The architect's job is to confirm it is in hand before certifying. 3 stakes if G707 is not in hand before final payment. First, the performance bond can be voided. The surety can argue that the owner released final payment without the consent required under the bond, and that release relieved the surety of its performance obligations. If the contractor then fails to honor warranty corrections during the 1-year period, the owner has no surety to call on. That protection is gone. Second, the payment bond can be voided. The surety can refuse to respond to subcontractor lien claims on the same theory. The owner's premature release relieved the surety, and the owner is now dealing with unpaid subs filing liens directly against the property title. Third, the architect named in the suit. When the owner certifies a building, releases final payment, and discovers liens or a missing warranty obligation, the question every plaintiff's attorney asks is, who signed the final certificate without confirming G707 was executed? The answer is the architect. And that architect's professional liability insurance is now responding to a claim that could have been avoided with one document. G707 is the document that keeps the bond alive through final payment. Confirm it, document it, then sign. 5 takeaways to lock in surety consent and retainage mechanics before lien waivers. 5 takeaways. AIA G707 is the consent of surety to final payment on bonded work, and on every bonded project it is required before the architect can certify final payment. Final payment without G707 can void both the performance bond and the payment bond, leaving the owner exposed to contractor failure losses and subcontractor liens against the property title. Retainage is typically 5 to 10% during construction, with a partial release at substantial completion when the architect issues G704, and full release at final completion with the final certificate for payment. The architect certifies each release based on actual observed completion of the work, not on contractor representations alone. And the architect signs the final certificate only after confirming G707 is in hand and executed by the surety. Anything less puts the architect's professional liability coverage in the path of the post-occupancy lawsuit. Here is the trap most owners learn about the hard way, and the exam writes into every CE form. The general contractor delivers a final lien waiver, the owner makes final payment, and 3 months later, a subcontractor files a lien on the owner's property because the GC never paid them. The owner says, "But I have the waiver." The court says, that waiver came from the GC, not from the sub, and the sub has independent lien rights. The lien stands. The owner now has a cloud on title and a lawsuit against the contractor who has likely vanished. The takeaway you need to carry into every closeout. Lien waivers from the general contractor alone are not enough. The owner needs waivers from the contractor and from every subcontractor and major material supplier of consequence, because every tier has its own lien rights, and those rights are independent of whether the tier above was paid. AIA G706 is the contractor's sworn affidavit that all subs and suppliers have been paid, but the architect should also see actual sub-waivers before certifying final payment. The 4 waiver types vary by 2 dimensions: when they apply and whether they are conditional. 4 waiver types, varying on 2 dimensions: timing and condition. Conditional waiver on progress payment. Signed with each progress payment, it waives the lien rights only when the payment actually clears the bank. If the check bounces or never arrives, the lien rights survive. Unconditional waiver on progress payment. Signed after the payment is received, it irrevocably waives the lien rights for the amount stated, regardless of what happens next. Conditional waiver on final payment. Signed with the final payment application, it waives all lien rights, but again, only when the payment clears. Unconditional waiver on final payment. Signed after final payment is received, it irrevocably waives every lien right for the entire project, from contractor and from every sub who signs. The architect's role at closeout is to confirm that unconditional waivers on final payment have been collected from the contractor and from every sub and major supplier. Anything less leaves the owner's title exposed. 3 stakes if the owner relies only on the GC's waiver. Each is the basis of a real post-closeout lawsuit. 3 real losses if the owner relies only on the GC's lien waiver. First, subcontractor lien. Every state's lien statute gives subcontractors independent lien rights against the owner's property, and those rights are not waived by the general contractor's waiver. A sub who never got paid by the GC can record a lien on the title, and the owner now has to clear it, usually by paying the sub directly and then suing the GC for reimbursement if the GC still exists. Second, material supplier lien. Major material suppliers, the steel fabricator, the curtain wall manufacturer, the rooftop equipment supplier, typically also have independent lien rights under state statute, and they file when they have not been paid even if the GC was. The architect should see waivers from each supplier of consequence, not just the contractor. Third, cloud on title. Even one outstanding lien creates a cloud on title that blocks the owner from selling or refinancing the property until the lien is satisfied. The lien does not go away because the GC signed a waiver. The architect who certifies final payment without confirming sub and supplier waivers is the architect whose name appears in the title defect lawsuit. 5 takeaways to close out Section 2.3 before moving to Certificate of Occupancy distinctions. 5 takeaways. 4 lien waiver types vary on 2 dimensions: conditional versus unconditional, and progress payment versus final payment. The closeout standard is unconditional on final payment from every tier of the contracting chain. Subcontractors and major material suppliers have independent lien rights under state lien statutes, and those rights are not waived by the general contractor's waiver. That is the trap most owners learn about the hard way. Unconditional on final payment is the closeout standard for the contractor and for every subcontractor and major supplier of consequence. Anything less leaves the title exposed. AIA G706 is the contractor's sworn affidavit that all payables to subs and suppliers have been paid, and it supports but does not substitute for actual sub waivers. And the architect's role at closeout is to confirm that sub and supplier waivers are in hand before certifying the final certificate for payment. That confirmation is the architect's defense in the post-closeout title defect lawsuit. Here's the trap most architects fall into. An NCARB writes into every CE form. You will see this scenario 4 different ways across the exam, and the same wrong answer choice will be sitting in front of you each time. The Certificate of Occupancy and the Certificate of Substantial Completion are 2 entirely different documents, issued by 2 entirely different authorities for 2 entirely different purposes. The CO is a government document. A municipal building official inspects the building, determines code compliance for fire safety, egress, structure, and accessibility, and issues the CO, after which legal occupancy is permitted. G704 is a private contract document. The architect inspects, determines contract document compliance, and issues G704, after which contractual substantial completion has occurred. The 2 determinations are independent. A building can have a CO, but not be substantially complete, or be substantially complete without yet having a CO. Pick an answer that equates them on the exam, and you fail the question. Pick that conflation in practice, and you have certified a building under the wrong authority, which becomes the basis of the lawsuit when the warranty clock starts on the wrong date. Set the 2 certificates side by side to see how completely they differ. On the left, the Certificate of Occupancy, issued by the local building authority or code official, never by the architect. Based on building code compliance, the inspector verifies that the building meets the applicable code requirements for fire safety, egress, structure, and accessibility. Its purpose is to grant legal authorization to occupy the building. Its legal source is the municipal code and zoning law that governs the jurisdiction. On the right, the Certificate of Substantial Completion, issued by the architect, who has been retained to determine when the contract has been substantially performed. Based on contract document compliance, does the work conform to what the contract documents required? Its purpose is to certify contractual substantial completion, which triggers warranty start, statute of repose, retainage release, insurance shift, and owner occupancy under the contract. Its legal source is the contract between owner and contractor, a private legal instrument, not a public one. Different issuers, different bases, different legal sources. 2 documents that are easy to confuse and never the same. 6 features show where the two diverge. Each is a place the exam tests the boundary. 6 features distinguish the two certificates. Issuer. The CO is issued by the building official, while G704 is issued by the architect, and the architect never issues the CO, period. Basis. The CO turns on building code compliance, while G704 turns on contract document compliance. A building can comply with code and still not conform to the contract. For example, the owner specified a higher grade finish than code required, and the contractor delivered code-level finish. The architect cannot certify substantial completion of that work, even if the building official issues the CO. Authority. The CO is a municipal instrument, while G704 is a private contract document. Triggers. The CO permits legal occupancy under code, while G704 fires 5 contract clocks: warranty, statute of repose, retainage release, insurance shift, and owner occupancy under the contract. Document type. The CO is a permit class government instrument, while G704 is the AIA standard form attached to the contract. Timing. The CO may issue before, after, or at the same time as substantial completion. The two timings are independent. 3 traps the exam writes when these two certificates get conflated, including the TCO trap. 3 trap answers, each equating 2 documents, the contract and the code, keep independent by design. First trap holds that the architect issues the certificate of occupancy. Wrong, because the CO is issued by the building official, a public authority, and the architect has no power to issue it. Second trap holds that a temporary certificate of occupancy means substantial completion has occurred under the contract. Wrong, because a TCO is a code document that permits partial occupancy while minor code items are completed, and it does not certify contract compliance under any reading of A201. The architect's G704 determination is independent of whether a TCO has issued. Third trap holds that CO issuance triggers the warranty clock. Wrong, because the warranty clock under A201, section 12.2.2, starts on the architect's certified date on G704, not on the date the building official signs the CO. The CO may precede, follow, or coincide with G704, and the warranty does not care about the CO. Pick any of the 3 trap answers on the exam, and you have picked wrong. 5 takeaways to lock in the CO versus G704 distinction before moving to closeout deliverables. 5 takeaways. The Certificate of Occupancy is a government document issued by the local building official based on building code compliance, granting legal authorization to occupy the building. G704 is a contract document issued by the architect based on contract document compliance, granting contractual substantial completion. 2 authorities, 2 bases, 2 purposes, and the timing of the 2 is independent. A building can have a CO without being substantially complete under the contract, or be substantially complete without yet having a CO. The temporary certificate of occupancy is still a code document. It allows partial or conditional occupancy under code, but it does not equal substantial completion under the contract. And conflating the CO with G704 is the single most tested closeout trap on the CE division. Every wrong answer the exam writes about these certificates either equates them, swaps their issuers, or has the CO triggering contractual consequences that only G704 can trigger. Operation and maintenance manuals are not optional binders the contractor drops off at the loading dock. They are required submittals under the contract, comprehensive documents that tell the owner how to operate, maintain, and repair every system in the building. The exam tests 2 things about O&M manuals: what they contain and when the architect must review them. Both answers matter because incomplete manuals are grounds for the architect to withhold certification of final payment. The architect reviews O&M manuals before final completion, not after, not in parallel with final payment, but before. If a contractor delivers manuals on the day final payment is requested and the architect has not had time to review, the certification cannot issue. The owner who tries to operate a building without complete O&M documentation is the owner whose preventive maintenance schedule never starts and whose warranty claims go unsupported because nobody knows when the equipment was installed. Walk the 7 sections that every O&M manual must contain. 7 sections, each answering a different operational question. Equipment information identifies what is in the building: manufacturer, model, serial number, and capacity for every piece of installed equipment of consequence. Operating procedures explain startup, shutdown, and normal operation sequence, the day-to-day instructions the facility staff use. Maintenance schedules list preventive maintenance tasks and their frequencies, what to do weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. Parts lists name the replacement parts the owner will need, with suppliers and part numbers so they can be sourced without guesswork. Warranty information records the terms, contacts, and claim procedures for every warranty in the building. Without this section, warranty claims fail because nobody knows who to call. Emergency procedures cover shutdown and troubleshooting for fire, flood, power loss, and other operational emergencies. And as-built specifications document what was actually installed, which often differs from what was originally specified. And the owner needs the actual specification to source replacements correctly. 3 things the architect should verify when reviewing manuals before certifying final completion. 3 review points before the architect accepts O&M manuals as part of closeout. First, completeness. Every required section must be present for every system of consequence in the building. A binder that has HVAC operating instructions but no maintenance schedule or warranty information but no parts list is not a complete manual. The architect lists what is missing in writing and rejects the submittal. Second, accuracy. The manuals must match the actual installed equipment, not the generic catalog data the manufacturer sends out for any product. If the contractor installed model ABC100 and the manual contains the data for model ABC200, the manual is wrong and must be replaced. Third, accessibility. The manuals must be organized, indexed, and delivered in a format the facility staff can actually use, usually a printed binder plus a searchable digital copy. A palette of unsorted PDFs is not an acceptable submittal. The architect's job at this step is to push back on contractor submittals that look complete but are not actually usable, because a manual that nobody can use is no protection at all when a system fails in year 3. 5 takeaways before moving to as-built and record drawings. 5 takeaways. Operation and maintenance manuals are required submittals under the contract, reviewed by the architect before final completion, not after final payment has been requested. 7 sections must be present in every manual: equipment information, operating procedures, maintenance schedules, parts lists, warranty information, emergency procedures, and as-built specifications. The architect verifies 3 things: completeness, accuracy, and accessibility. Incomplete or inaccurate manuals are grounds for the architect to withhold final payment certification. That is the enforcement point on closeout, because contractors deliver manuals quickly when payment depends on them. And manuals must match the actual installed equipment, not the generic catalog data the manufacturer publishes, because owners need the actual data to source replacement parts and to file warranty claims correctly. Most architects who use these terms interchangeably are setting up an exam loss. As-built drawings and record drawings are 2 different documents prepared by 2 different parties at 2 different points in the project. As-builts are the contractor's field-marked construction drawings, updated throughout the project to show actual installed conditions. The cleanout that ended up 6 feet east of where it was drawn, the duct that was rerouted around a beam, the wall that was field-furred to accommodate piping. The contractor maintains the as-builts during construction, not at the end. Record drawings are the architect's clean compilation of the as-built information into a final set of drawings that becomes the owner's reference for the building. The architect produces record drawings during closeout, and the architect's liability exposure on record drawings rests entirely on noting that they relied on contractor-provided as-built information, because the architect does not independently verify concealed conditions. Skip that note, and you have certified field locations you never actually saw. Set the two documents side by side, and the responsibility split becomes clear. Two documents, two preparers, two timings. On the left, as-built drawings, prepared by the contractor, who is the only party with continuous physical presence on site. Content is field markups on the construction drawings, red lines, arrows, dimensions, notes, showing what was actually built versus what was drawn. Timing is during construction, maintained as the work happens, not reconstructed at the end from memory. Format is marked up drawings, either paper sets in the trailer or digital markups in software the contractor maintains. On the right, record drawings, prepared by the architect, typically as an additional services item under B101, because compiling a clean set of record drawings from contractor as-builts is meaningful additional work. Content is a clean compilation that incorporates the as-built data into the architect's drawing set. Timing is during the closeout phase, after the contractor's as-builts are delivered and reviewed. Format is revised CAD, or BIM files, that become the owner's permanent reference set for the building. The two documents are sequential. Contractor as-builts feed into architect record drawings. 5 things the contractor's as-builts must show. Each one is what enables the architect's record drawings to be accurate. 5 things the contractor's as-built drawings must document. First, actual locations of concealed utilities and infrastructure. Every buried pipe, conduit run, and underground utility marked on the plan as it was actually placed, not as it was drawn. Second, changes from the original design. Every field change, every authorized rerouting, every change order modification reflected on the drawings. Without this, the architect's record drawings will show the original design and miss 6 months of changes. Third, actual dimensions where they differ from design. Wall locations, ceiling heights, equipment placements that ended up different from the drawings for any reason. Fourth, locations of valves, cleanouts, access panels, and other hidden items. The kind of thing the maintenance staff needs to find on day one and cannot if it is not on the drawings. Fifth, deviations authorized by change order or field directive. Every adjustment the architect approved during construction, captured on the drawing so the record set reflects what was contractually built. Without all 5, the architect's record drawings end up certifying conditions that may not exist. 3 protections the architect builds into record drawings to manage the liability of compiling from contractor information. 3 protections every architect builds into the record drawings to manage the liability of compiling from contractor-provided information. First, note on the drawings, in the title block or general notes, that the record drawings rely on contractor-provided as-built information. That single note is the architect's defense when a concealed condition lawsuit asks why the record drawings show the underground utility in a location it turned out not to be. Second, state explicitly that the architect did not independently verify concealed conditions. The architect was not on site every day excavating utilities. That is the contractor's role, and the record drawings depend on the contractor's good faith documentation. Third, use the contractor's as-builts as the source. Never invent locations from memory or from what the design intended. If the as-builts are incomplete or missing, the architect's record drawings should reflect that incompleteness with a note rather than guessing. The architect who certifies record drawings without these 3 protections is the architect personally named when the owner sues over a utility hit during a future renovation, because the record drawings showed the utility in a location it was not actually in. 5 takeaways before moving to warranties and spare parts. 5 takeaways. As-built drawings are prepared by the contractor, field marked on the construction drawings, and maintained throughout construction to show actual installed conditions. Record drawings are compiled by the architect during closeout, a clean drawing set incorporating the contractor's as-built data into the architect's drawing files. The architect must note on the record drawings that they rely on contractor-provided as-built information. That note is the architect's defense in any future concealed condition lawsuit. The architect does not independently verify concealed conditions because the architect was not on site continuously to dig up utilities. The contractor was. And confusing the two documents on the exam is a wrong answer. Confusing them in practice is the basis for a lawsuit naming the architect when a future contractor hits a utility the record drawing showed in a different location. Year 1 of a new building runs on the warranty period and the contractor's correction obligation. Year 2 runs on the owner's own staff, supplies, and documentation. The closeout deliverables that bridge Year 1 to Year 2 are warranties, spare parts and attic stock, owner training, keys, test and balance reports, and certificates. Skip any of them, and you have set the owner up to operate the building blind in Year 2. And at least one of these traps will show up on the exam as a wrong answer choice. Owner training is the one most architects underestimate. Specifications typically require the contractor to arrange training sessions with equipment manufacturers before final completion. If untrained staff turn on a chiller incorrectly or fail to follow startup procedures on a boiler, the manufacturer can void the warranty for improper operation. That is a real loss the owner absorbs because training was treated as optional. Verify the training sessions happened before certifying final payment. Walk the 6 deliverables that the contractor provides as part of closeout. 6 closeout deliverables, all the contractor's responsibility to provide as part of substantial and final completion. First, warranty documentation collected from subs and manufacturers and organized into a single file with terms and contacts, so the owner can call the right party when something fails in month 8. Second, spare parts and attic stock per the specification. Tiles, paint, filters, lamps, gaskets, anything the spec calls out for ongoing maintenance. Without attic stock, the owner is paying premium replacement prices in Year 2 for parts that should have been delivered at closeout. Third, owner training arranged by the contractor and conducted by the equipment manufacturers. Hands-on sessions on every major system, scheduled before final completion. Fourth, keys and a keying schedule documenting the master key system with every key labeled. Fifth, test and balance reports for HVAC systems, the final balancing data and any commissioning reports. Sixth, certificates and permits, elevator certification, fire alarm acceptance, sprinkler system testing. Every code-required certificate handed over so the owner can demonstrate compliance during future inspections. 3 stakes on owner training, the deliverable that gets skipped most often and costs the most when it does. 3 real losses when training is skipped or rushed. First, the warranty can be voided. Manufacturers consistently include warranty conditions that require proper operation by trained personnel, and a claim for a failed compressor or controller can be refused if the manufacturer concludes that improper operation caused the failure. The owner now pays out of pocket for what should have been a warranted repair. Second, equipment damage. Incorrect startup or shutdown of major equipment, chillers, boilers, large pumps, generators, can damage the equipment immediately, burning out compressors, scoring bearings, fouling heat exchangers. These are not theoretical risks. They happen in the first month of operation when untrained staff push buttons without understanding sequence. Third, the architect can be named in a claim. Training is a specified deliverable under Division 01. And if the architect certifies final completion without confirming training happened, the architect's signature is the legal record that the deliverable was satisfied. When training was not actually delivered and damage results, the architect ends up named in the lawsuit alongside the contractor. Verify training happened, actually happened, not just was scheduled, before certifying final completion. 5 takeaways before moving to the warranty types section. 5 takeaways. 6 closeout deliverables travel with the building from contractor to owner. Warranty documentation, spare parts and attic stock, owner training, keys with keying schedule, test and balance reports, and certificates and permits. Owner training must occur before final completion, not after. The contractor arranges the sessions, the manufacturers conduct them, and the architect verifies they actually happened before certifying. Untrained operation can void manufacturer warranties when a claim is later denied because improper operation caused the failure. Spare parts and attic stock are delivered per Division 01 specifications. Every quantity called out in the specification arrives in delivered condition at closeout, organized for future use. And the architect verifies all 6 deliverables are in place before certifying final payment, because each one is an enforceable specification requirement, and missing any one is grounds to withhold certification. Most architects say the warranty is a year. Then they answer a CE question wrong because the warranty is not a single year. 3 distinct warranty types coexist on every construction project, and the exam tests whether you know what each one covers, who provides it, and how long it lasts. The contractor's general warranty under A201, Section 12.2.2, is a 1-year correction period that obligates the contractor to fix defects in workmanship and materials. Manufacturer warranties run independently, often for 1 to 25 years, depending on the product. Extended specified warranties, roofing, waterproofing, glazing, sometimes structural, are called out in Division 1 and typically run 2 to 20 years from substantial completion. On any given building, there are dozens of warranties running simultaneously, each with its own clock and its own claim path. Treat them all as one, and you have just guaranteed wrong answers on at least 3 CE questions per form, and you have left the owner unable to claim against a manufacturer who would have paid if asked correctly. Walk the 3 warranty types side by side with who provides each, how long it lasts, and what it covers. 3 warranty types compared on 4 dimensions. The contractor's general warranty is provided by the general contractor, runs 1 year under A201, Section 12.2.2, and covers materials and workmanship conformance with the contract documents. This is the warranty most candidates think is the whole story, and it is the shortest of the 3. Manufacturer warranties are provided directly by the equipment or material manufacturer, run anywhere from 1 to 25 years, depending on the product, and cover specific product performance and defects. The roofing membrane has its own warranty from the manufacturer. The HVAC compressor has its own warranty from the manufacturer. Extended or specified warranties are provided by the contractor or by the manufacturer through the contractor, are called out in Division 01 specifications, typically run 2 to 20 years from substantial completion, and cover specific systems where the owner wants longer protection than a 1-year contractor warranty: roofing, waterproofing, glazing, sometimes structural. 3 warranty types, 3 clocks, 3 claim paths. 3 traps the exam writes about the 1-year period. Every one of them treats the contractor warranty as a cap on something it does not cap. 3 traps, each treating the contractor's 1-year period as if it capped all owner claims. First trap holds that the 1-year period is the owner's only chance to claim against the contractor. Wrong, because A201 Section 12.2.5 explicitly states that the 1-year correction period is a specific contractual obligation to correct, not a limitation on other rights or remedies. The owner can still pursue claims for latent defects discovered after that year, bounded only by the state's statute of limitations and statute of repose. Second trap holds that all warranties expire at 1 year. Wrong, because manufacturer warranties and extended specified warranties run on their own clocks, independent of the contractor's 1-year period. A roofing warranty can run 20 years. A chiller warranty can run 5 years. The contractor's 1-year period has no effect on either. Third trap holds that latent defects discovered after 1 year cannot be pursued. Wrong, because the statute of limitations starts running on discovery in most states, and the statute of repose is the absolute outer boundary, typically 6 to 15 years from substantial completion. A latent waterproofing failure discovered in year 5 is fully within the architect's and contractor's liability exposure, even though the contractor's warranty period has long expired. And the lawsuit that follows can name the architect personally for the design choices that led to the failure. 5 takeaways before moving to the 1-year correction period mechanics. 5 takeaways. 3 warranty types coexist on every construction project: the contractor's 1-year general warranty, manufacturer warranties, and extended specified warranties, and each has its own clock and its own claim path. The contractor's general warranty under A201, Section 12.2.2 runs 1 year from the substantial completion date and covers materials and workmanship conformance with the contract documents. Manufacturer warranties run from 1 to 25 plus years, depending on the product, on clocks independent of the contractor's 1-year period. Extended warranties under Division 01 specifications typically run 2 to 20 years from substantial completion and cover specific systems where the owner wants longer protection. And the contractor's 1-year period is not a cap on legal claims. A201, Section 12.2.5 says it does not limit other rights or remedies, and latent defects discovered after the year can still be pursued under state statutes of limitations and repose. You should burn one date into the architect's project calendar: the 11-month walkthrough. The 1-year correction period under A201 Section 12.2.2 starts at substantial completion, not final completion, not move-in, not the day the certificate of occupancy issues. If substantial completion is January 1st, 2026, the correction period ends December 31st, 2026. During that year, the contractor is obligated to return and correct any defects the owner reports. After that year, the contractor is no longer obligated to correct items reported for the first time, though the owner can still sue for latent defects under the statute of limitations and repose. The practical consequence is the 11-month walkthrough. Roughly 30 days before the 1-year anniversary of substantial completion, the architect and owner walk the building looking for warranty items to report while the correction obligation is still live. Skip that walkthrough, and the items discovered in month 14 are no longer the contractor's free obligation. They become the owner's repair budget, and the architect named in the resulting lawsuit is the one who never scheduled the walkthrough. Walk the warranty timeline event by event so you can place every item on the right clock. 5 events on the warranty clock, each placed against the substantial completion anchor. Substantial completion is the date on G704. The 1-year correction period starts here and nowhere else. Punch list completion happens in the weeks after substantial completion and has no effect on the warranty start date. The clock is already running while the punch list is being finished. Final completion happens months after substantial completion, often 6 to 12 months later, and has no effect on the warranty. The clock is already running. The 11-month walkthrough is scheduled approximately 30 days before the warranty ends, the last practical chance for the architect and owner to identify warranty items and get them reported to the contractor in writing. The 1-year correction period ends exactly 12 months after the substantial completion date, and the contractor's obligation to correct items reported for the first time expires. Items reported before the year is up are still the contractor's responsibility until corrected, but items first reported after the year is up are the owner's repair budget, unless the defect rises to a litigation claim under state law. 3 traps the exam writes about when the warranty starts and what happens during the correction period. 3 traps that move the warranty start or misread the correction reset rule. First trap holds that the warranty starts at final completion. Wrong, because A201 Section 12.2.2 explicitly starts the one-year correction period at substantial completion, regardless of when final completion eventually occurs, and the contractor cannot extend the warranty by delaying final completion. Second trap holds that the warranty starts when the owner physically moves in. Wrong, because the warranty start is tied to the architect's certified date on G704, not to the move-in date. A TCO issued by the building official does not start the contract warranty. The architect's G704 does. Third trap holds that a contractor repair late in the correction period carries no new clock. Wrong, because Section 12.2.2.1 starts a fresh 12-month correction period on the corrected work from the date of the repair. This is the reset rule, and it prevents contractors from making poor, last-minute repairs that fail again shortly after the original warranty would have expired. A rushed repair in month 11 creates a new 12-month obligation from the repair date. The owner who knows the reset rule and pushes the contractor for a documented repair extends the protection on that specific work by another year. 5 takeaways before moving to the statute of limitations and statute of repose framework. 5 takeaways. The warranty starts at substantial completion under A201, Section 12.2.2, the architect's certified date on G704, and from no other date. Not final completion, not the move-in date, not the date the building official issues the certificate of occupancy. The 11-month walkthrough is the architect's most important post-occupancy visit, scheduled 30 days before the warranty expires, with the owner present to identify and report every warranty item while the contractor's correction obligation is still live. Section 12.2.2.1 is the reset rule. Corrected work gets a fresh 12-month correction period from the date of the repair, which prevents contractors from making weak, last-minute repairs that fail again after the original warranty expires. Items first reported after the year ends fall outside the contractor's correction obligation, though the owner may still have remedies under state statutes of limitations and repose. Knowing the clock and walking the building before it ends is the architect's job. Here is the framework most architects misread on the CE exam, and the one you need to internalize completely. 3 different legal clocks run simultaneously after substantial completion, and they interact in ways most candidates have never thought about. The warranty, the contractor's correction period under A201, is the shortest, 1 year. The statute of limitations is the next, 3 to 10 years depending on the state, but here is the critical detail. It runs from when the defect is discovered, or should have been discovered with reasonable diligence, not from substantial completion. The statute of repose is the longest and the only absolute deadline, 6 to 15 years from substantial completion, no exceptions, no discovery rule extensions. Why does this matter to you on the exam and in practice? Because the end of the 1-year correction period does not end the contractor's or the architect's liability exposure. A latent defect, a hidden structural problem, a concealed waterproofing failure, a code non-compliant detail can surface 5, 8, or 12 years later, and the owner can sue if the statute of repose has not yet run. The warranty is just the first of 3 clocks, and it is the shortest. Place the 3 clocks side by side so you can answer any question about which one controls. 3 clocks compared on 4 dimensions. The warranty correction period is a contract right to have defects corrected. The contractor's obligation under A201 to fix items reported during the year. It runs 1 year from substantial completion. The statute of limitations is a legal deadline to file suit after a defect is discovered, a state-by-state rule that typically runs 3 to 10 years from the date the defect was discovered or reasonably should have been discovered. This is the discovery rule, and it is what makes latent defect litigation possible long after construction. The statute of repose is an absolute cutoff regardless of when the defect is discovered, a state-by-state outer boundary of 6 to 15 years from substantial completion. Once the repose period expires, no construction defect claim can be filed against the architect or contractor, period. The repose statute is the final shield, and it is the only one of the 3 timeframes that is absolute. The warranty is contractual and short. The statute of limitations is legal and discovery triggered. The statute of repose is legal and absolute. Walk a worked example because the interaction between the limitations and repose clocks is what trips candidates. 4 steps to see how the limitations and repose clocks interact. Step 1. Assume a state with a 4-year statute of limitations measured from discovery and a 10-year statute of repose measured from substantial completion. These are typical numbers. The actual values vary by state. Step 2. Substantial completion occurs January 1st, 2020. The 10-year repose clock starts running on that date and expires January 1st, 2030. Step 3. A latent waterproofing defect is discovered January 1st, 2028, 8 years after substantial completion. Step 4. The owner's deadline to file suit is the earlier of 2 dates. 2028 plus 4 years of statute of limitations gives 2032. But the repose clock expires January 1st, 2030, which is earlier, so the repose deadline controls. The owner has only 2 years from discovery to file suit, not the 4 years the limitations period would have allowed in isolation. The answer is, the statute of repose is the ceiling on every claim. Whenever it expires first, the limitations clock is cut short. This is why architects carry tail coverage extensions on professional liability insurance beyond the repose period in some states. 3 traps the exam writes about, which clock controls, and what happens when the 1-year period ends. 3 traps about when liability ends. First trap holds that liability ends at 1 year because the contractor's correction period has expired. Wrong, because the 1-year period ends the contractor's contract obligation to correct, but the owner's legal right to sue under the statute of limitations and the statute of repose continues for years longer. The architect who closes the file at year 1 is the architect named in the lawsuit at year 6, when a latent defect surfaces and the discovery rule clock starts. Second trap holds that the statute of limitations starts at substantial completion. Wrong, because in most states, the statute of limitations starts at discovery, meaning when the defect was found or reasonably should have been found, not at the certified date. This is the discovery rule, and it is what allows latent defect litigation many years after construction, which is why the architect needs to maintain records long beyond the 1-year period. Third trap holds that the statute of repose can be extended by the discovery rule like the statute of limitations can. Wrong, because the repose statute is absolute, a hard ceiling that does not move regardless of when the defect was discovered. The repose cutoff is the architect's final defense, and it is the only one of the 3 timeframes that gives certainty about when liability truly ends. 5 takeaways to close out Section 2.5 before moving to the seasonal commissioning and post-occupancy slide. 5 takeaways. 3 legal clocks run after substantial completion: the warranty correction period at 1 year, the statute of limitations at 3 to 10 years from discovery, and the statute of repose at 6 to 15 years from substantial completion. The warranty is a contractual obligation between owner and contractor. The limitations and repose periods are legal deadlines established by state statute. The statute of repose is the only absolute cutoff. It cannot be extended by the discovery rule, and it is the architect's final defense. The end of the 1-year warranty period does not end the architect's or contractor's liability. Latent defects discovered later can still be the basis of a lawsuit until repose runs. And the architect maintains project records and professional liability insurance through the repose period for this reason. Anything shorter is a coverage gap that the architect's own assets fill if a claim arrives. Substantial completion verifies that the building is ready for occupancy, but some systems cannot be fully tested on the certified date because the operational conditions they need have not happened yet. A building completed in July cannot have its heating system tested under design winter conditions until the first cold day in December. A building completed in February cannot have its cooling system tested under design summer conditions until the first hot week in July. The architect who issues G704 in July has certified that the heating system was installed correctly, but not that it actually performs across all 4 seasons. Seasonal commissioning fills that gap. It is a post-occupancy verification activity, typically conducted across the first full year of operation, that confirms each major system performs in the season for which it was designed. The 11-month walkthrough and the seasonal commissioning activities together close the loop between substantial completion and full operational verification. And the owner who skips them is the owner whose HVAC performance issues become litigation in year 2. Walk the 5 post-occupancy activities that run on top of substantial completion. 5 activities, all running on top of substantial completion. Seasonal commissioning runs across the first full year of operation, verifying that every system actually performs in the season it was designed for, not just in the season the building was completed in. HVAC seasonal testing is a specific element of seasonal commissioning, confirming that heating performs in winter, cooling performs in summer, and the controls properly sequence between modes during the swing seasons. The 11-month walkthrough is scheduled roughly 30 days before the 1-year correction period ends. The architect and owner walk the building together to identify every warranty item and report it to the contractor while the correction obligation is still live. The post-occupancy evaluation is a broader assessment performed 6 to 18 months after occupancy that evaluates the building's actual performance against design intent. And the Lessons Learned session captures the project team's experience after closeout. What worked, what did not, and what should change for the next project. 5 activities, 5 purposes, all of them operating on the same building. 3 stakes when seasonal commissioning is treated as optional. Every one is a real loss the owner absorbs. 3 real losses when seasonal commissioning is treated as optional or rushed. First, the HVAC system underperforms in design conditions. A building commissioned only in mild weather has not had its heating system stressed at design outdoor temperature, and the first hard cold snap reveals that the boiler cannot maintain set point, or the heat recovery system fails, or the controls do not properly sequence morning warm-up. None of these would have been caught at substantial completion because the conditions had not occurred yet. Second, the warranty window closes on issues that only surface in winter or summer extremes. If the building was completed in summer and the heating problem surfaces in February at month 8, the warranty is still live, but if commissioning was skipped and the problem is not identified until month 13, the contractor's correction obligation has expired. Third, energy bills exceed the model. Design intent assumed certain efficiency from HVAC, lighting controls, and envelope performance. If commissioning is skipped, the gap between modeled and actual performance is never quantified, and the owner has no documented basis to require the contractor to address it. Skip seasonal commissioning and the owner pays in equipment failures, lost warranty claims, and higher operating costs that never get challenged. 5 takeaways before moving to post-occupancy evaluation in the next slide. 5 takeaways. Some systems cannot be fully tested at substantial completion because the operational conditions they need have not happened yet. Winter heating performance cannot be verified in summer. Summer cooling performance cannot be verified in winter. Seasonal commissioning runs across the first full year of operation to close that gap, confirming every system performs in the season it was designed for. The 11-month walkthrough is scheduled approximately 30 days before the 1-year correction period ends, giving the architect and owner one last chance to identify warranty items while the contractor's obligation is still live. Skipped commissioning means warranty claims close before the underlying issues surface. A heating problem identified in month 13 is no longer the contractor's correction obligation. And a documented seasonal commissioning protocol protects both the owner and the architect's certification. The architect who signs G704 with the protocol in place has a defensible record of how operational verification was completed. Most firms never close the loop on what they design. The building gets occupied, the contractor finishes punch list, the architect signs final payment, and the project file closes. 2 years later, the same firm designs a similar building and makes some of the same assumptions, and lives with some of the same problems. Post-occupancy evaluation is the evidence-based feedback loop that closes that gap. POE is a systematic process of evaluating a building's performance after it has been occupied, using a defined methodology: surveys, monitoring, interviews, observation, document review, to assess how well the building meets its users' needs and performs relative to design intent. The output is data, not anecdote. Energy consumption versus the model. Occupant satisfaction versus assumed comfort. Maintenance frequency versus design assumptions. Firms that conduct POE systematically on completed projects are firms whose next project has a better starting point. And the architect who can demonstrate evidence-based design in the discovery phase of a future claim has a real defense against allegations that the design did not consider how it would actually be used. Walk the 5 POE methods that produce the data behind the loop. 5 methods, each capturing different operational data. Occupant surveys collect user satisfaction information, comfort levels, perceived functionality, day-to-day experience with the building's spaces. Thermal comfort questionnaires are the most common example. Occupants report whether the space is comfortable across times of day and seasons, and the data shows whether the design assumptions about comfort actually hold up. Interviews go deeper than surveys, capturing nuanced user experiences from facility managers, department heads, and operations staff who know the building's behavior in detail. Physical monitoring captures objective performance data: energy consumption, indoor air quality, temperature, humidity, lighting levels, measured against the design intent and the modeled performance from the original analysis. Walkthrough observation captures how the spaces are actually being used versus how they were intended to be used: traffic patterns, furniture arrangements, signage gaps. And document review pulls operational data from utility bills, maintenance logs, complaint records, and energy management reports. 5 methods, each adding a layer to the picture of how the building is actually performing. 3 things the firm must do with POE data. Collecting it is not the work. Using it is. 3 things the firm must do with POE data. Without these steps, POE becomes a binder nobody opens after the project closes. First, document findings in a searchable format accessible to future design teams. The findings need to be tagged by building type, system, climate zone, and any other relevant dimensions, so a designer working on a similar project 2 years later can actually find the relevant data. A PDF report sitting on a project server that no one knows about is not feedback. It is archive. Second, apply lessons to design standards. The firm's typical details and standard specifications should be updated based on what POE actually revealed. If a particular detail repeatedly performed worse than expected, the standard detail changes. Without this step, the lessons are personal knowledge that lives with the designer until they leave the firm. Third, share findings with the project team: owner, contractor, consultants, key subcontractors. Every party can benefit from honest assessment of what worked and what did not. And a POE that names lessons without naming villains creates a stronger team relationship for the next project. POE data has value only when the firm actually uses it. Most firms collect, then forget. The firms that close the loop are the firms whose subsequent projects show measurable improvement. 5 takeaways before moving to lessons learned documentation. 5 takeaways. Post-occupancy evaluation is a systematic process for evaluating building performance after the building has been occupied, using a defined methodology to compare actual performance against design intent. 5 methods produce the underlying data: occupant surveys, interviews, physical monitoring, walkthrough observation, and document review. POE creates the evidence base for design decisions on future projects. Every firm that conducts POE systematically can demonstrate evidence-based design in a way that improves future work and provides real protection in the discovery phase of any future claim. Findings must be documented in a searchable format and applied to update the firm's typical details and design standards. Without this, POE is data nobody uses. And POE closes the loop between design intent and built reality, the gap that most firms never close, and the closing of which separates firms that learn from firms that repeat the same assumptions. Every firm holds a lessons learned session at the end of a project. Almost none of those sessions produce value beyond the room they happen in. Here is the discipline that separates the firms that actually learn from the firms that just talk. A lessons learned session has 3 obligations to the next project. Capture what the team actually learned in concrete, specific terms, not vague generalities about communication. Organize that knowledge in a format the next design team can search and find. And apply the lessons to the firm's standard details, specifications, and workflows so the next similar project starts ahead of where this one started. Without all 3, the lessons learned session is theater. The architect who sits through a debrief and watches the file go into the project archive without these 3 disciplines has just lost the most valuable output of an entire project. The closeout signature is not the end of the project's value to the firm. The lessons captured and applied are: walk the 6 categories of what lessons learned sessions should document. 6 categories the lessons learned session should document, each capturing a different dimension of project execution. First, design decisions that worked well, and the specific reasons they worked. Generalities like good communication are not lessons. Specifics like the daylight strategy on the east elevation delivered glare-free reading conditions confirmed by POE data are lessons. Second, design decisions that did not work, and what specifically should change on the next project. The mechanical architectural coordination process broke down in the 3rd floor coordination meeting, and we will use a different BIM coordination protocol from the start of DD phase forward. That is a lesson. Third, construction problems encountered and how they were resolved. The submittal pace fell behind in months 3 and 4, and the recovery strategy was a weekly tracking dashboard that we should implement from day 1 on the next job. Fourth, budget overruns or savings with specific causes. Not the bottom line, but the line items where the variance lived. Fifth, schedule delays or accelerations with specific causes. Sixth, subcontractor and material performance. Which firms and which products delivered, which struggled, which should be on the preferred list or the avoid list for the next similar project. 3 disciplines that turn captured lessons into applied knowledge. 3 disciplines that separate a real learning organization from a firm that just holds debrief meetings. First, document the lessons in a searchable format tagged by building type, system type, climate zone, and any other dimension the firm's project portfolio cuts on. A lesson tagged elementary school plus radiant floor plus mixed humid climate is findable by the designer working on a similar project 2 years later. A lesson written as a paragraph in a PDF that nobody can search is invisible after week 1. Second, update the firm's standard details and specifications based on actual performance. If a particular wall assembly repeatedly performed worse than expected, water infiltration, condensation, premature failure, the standard detail needs to change. Without this step, the firm's typical details remain frozen at whatever they were when the firm was founded, regardless of what subsequent projects have taught. Third, share findings with the full project team: owner, contractor, key consultants, major subcontractors. Every party can benefit from honest assessment of what worked and what did not, and a lessons learned session that names lessons without assigning blame creates the kind of team relationship that makes the next project easier and the next lawsuit less likely. Capture, organize, apply. Anything short of all three is theater. 5 takeaways to close out Module 3 and to close out the CE foundational track. 5 takeaways to close out Module 3. Lessons learned sessions need 3 disciplines to produce real value. Capture the specific lessons in concrete terms, organize them in a searchable format, and apply them to the firm's standard details and workflows. 6 documentation categories cover the meaningful dimensions of project execution: design wins, design losses, construction problems and resolutions, budget overruns and savings with causes, schedule delays and accelerations with causes, and subcontractor and material performance for future selection. Searchable tagging by building type, system, climate, and market is what makes the lessons findable years later when a designer is working on a similar project. Updating standard details based on actual performance closes the loop between what the design intended and what the building actually delivered. The gap most firms never close. And the Module 3 close. Project closeout is the architect's culmination, not the archive. Every certificate, every inspection, every lessons learned session is part of the work that distinguishes architects who learn from those who repeat. And the CE division tests whether you can carry that distinction into practice. Closeout is the one phase where every prior decision you made on the project finally shows up at the door. Every specification, every RFI, every change order, every field report walks in to be reconciled against the building that was actually built. Read Closeout that way, and the foundational module reorganizes naturally into 3 threads. The first thread is substantial completion, the anchor milestone where the single G704 signature triggers warranty, retainage release, insurance shift, and beneficial occupancy all in one moment, and where the architect's certification timing carries more weight than any other call in the phase. The second thread is the punch list and final completion sequence, where the contractor prepared list moves the project from substantial completion to final payment through a tightly procedural set of steps, none of which the architect can skip without exposing the design team. The third thread is warranty and evaluation, where the architect's role does not end at the final certificate. The 1-year correction period under AIAA 201 Article 12, the 11-month walkthrough that catches defects before the right lapses, and the post-occupancy evaluation that converts the project into evidence the firm uses on the next one. Treat closeout as a fiduciary moment, not procedural housekeeping, and the architect's exposure tail shortens dramatically over the decade that follows. Open with substantial completion, because every other closeout shift on the project hangs off that one date. 4 substantial completion anchors define the most consequential moment in the entire phase, and every other closeout shift you administer hangs off the single date on the G704 certificate. Substantial completion under AIAA 201, Section 9.8 is defined as the stage at which the owner can occupy or use the work for its intended purpose, with the contract documents allowing the work to continue under that occupancy. And that definition is what the exam tests, not a percentage of work complete, and not a list of remaining items. The Certificate of Substantial Completion on AIA G704 establishes the date in writing, signed by owner, contractor, and architect. And that date is the legal trigger for warranty start, retainage release, insurance shift from contractor's builder's risk to owner's property policy, and the owner's right of beneficial occupancy. Partial occupancy is the workflow when the owner needs to occupy a portion of the work before substantial completion of the whole. It requires written consent of all parties under A201, and the architect signs a partial G704 for the portion being occupied. And the certificate of occupancy versus substantial completion distinction trips many candidates. The CO is the jurisdictional permit document that allows legal occupancy under the building code, while substantial completion is the contractual milestone that allows beneficial occupancy under the contract, and the two can land on different dates depending on inspections. From substantial completion, the second thread is the procedural sequence that carries the project from the certificate to final payment. 4 punch list and final completion disciplines move the project from substantial completion to fully closed out, and each one is a procedural gate the architect cannot skip without exposing the design team. Punch list origin is the contractor's responsibility. The contractor prepares the initial list of remaining items, the architect reviews it, and the two walk the site together to confirm completeness and to identify anything the contractor missed. The architect does not invent the punch list from scratch. The architect verifies and supplements. The punch list versus incomplete work distinction is the exam-tested line. Items on the punch list are minor. The building can be used for its intended purpose despite them, and they do not prevent substantial completion. Items of incomplete work go to the substance of the contract, a missing major system, an unfinished structural element, and they block substantial completion until they are done. The final certificate for payment under G706 issues only after the punch list is cleared, lien waivers are received from all subs and suppliers, and the consent of surety is filed on G706A. And final accounting requires the contractor to deliver final lien waivers from every party that worked on the project before retainage actually releases, because any uncleared lien attaches to the owner's title, and the architect who certified final payment without verifying may have to answer for it. The third thread keeps the architect's role active past final payment and into the first operating year of the building. 3 warranty and evaluation disciplines extend the architect's role past final payment into the first operating year of the building, and each one is a moment where the fiduciary obligation to the owner extends beyond procedural housekeeping. The 1-year correction period under AIAA 201, Section 12.2, runs from the date of substantial completion, not from final completion, and the owner must notify the contractor in writing of any defect discovered during that year. Silence past the 12 months waives the right to free correction. The 11-month walkthrough is the architect's practice tool for protecting the owner. The architect and owner walk the building together about 30 days before the correction period closes, identify defects that have surfaced during the operating year, and notify the contractor in writing in time to invoke the correction obligation. The walkthrough is not in the AIA contract. It is an industry standard born from architects who watched owners lose claim rights through inaction. And post-occupancy evaluation captures lessons learned from how the building actually performs once occupied: energy use, occupant satisfaction, system performance, unexpected failures, and feeds those lessons back into the firm's design knowledge, so the next project starts from a measured baseline rather than from intuition. 4 module takeaways carry the foundational closeout arc into every project where you sit in the architect's chair at the door. 4 module takeaways close the foundational closeout arc into a single procedural posture you carry into every project. First, substantial completion under AIAG 704 is the anchor milestone. Warranty, retainage release, insurance shift, and beneficial occupancy all release on the single date the architect signs the certificate, which is why the certification timing is the single most consequential closeout decision. Second, the punch list discipline. The contractor prepares the list, the architect reviews and supplements, and the items must be minor, because incomplete work blocks substantial completion entirely under A201. Third, the final certificate release under G706, issued only after the punch list is cleared, lien waivers are received from all subs and suppliers, and the consent of surety is filed on G706A, because the architect who certifies final payment without verifying those documents may answer for an unreleased lien on the owner's title. Fourth, the 11-month walkthrough, the architect's fiduciary closeout move, where the design team and the owner inspect the building together 30 days before the 1-year correction period closes, identifying defects in time to invoke the contractor's obligation while the right still exists. Read closeout as the door where every prior decision arrives to be reconciled, and the architect's exposure shrinks over the decade that follows.